Well, hello there, people. This is video number 2, and what should I talk about? Well, as I look at my wall with all my posters and my roof with all my posters, yeah, it's kind of wallpaper at this point, all the video game posters I have. I got like a couple sections that are just kind of like where the light is. Kind of bad for that. But what should I do? As I look at all my games that I owned, as I look at the wall, as I look beyond those games, I think to myself, hey, here's a game I played recently for a video that I really don't know if I should do. I think I'm going to piss a lot of people off by saying this, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But what the hell? I think it deserves to be said. Final Fantasy VII sucks. Wow. Why do people like this game? Why? Like, I can't find anything like... Okay, other than the average nostalgia boner. And what I mean by a nostalgia boner is something that you played way when you were a kid that you like because you're a kid. So it's kind of like that little thing that, you know, those little things. Like, it's the same thing for me in Ninja Turtles. I know Ninja Turtles was complete another cheese fest. I know it was silly. And I'm probably going to get to the Ninja Turtle movie the new Ninja Turtle movie later, and kind of get my opinion on the matter. But we'll see how this video goes and how many people we'll see what happens when this video gets put on YouTube before I actually take into consideration anything else on the matter about doing the Ninja Turtles. But it is lit. What can I say about Final Fantasy VII? I honestly don't believe the hype. I don't believe the hype. That's what I can say about it. First of all, Final Fantasy VII basically was not innovative as much as people like to say it was innovative. The villains were boring. The characters were boring. Were boring, sad cutouts of stuff. And to be perfectly honest, after coming from Final Fantasy VI into 7, I was so disappointed. Like, Final Fantasy VI is probably, for the Super Nintendo, is probably one of the most innovative role-playing games for that era. For like, just before we get into the next-gen universe, like the PlayStation 2 and, you know, the GameCube, the Xbox, and we started getting to those, like, other generations, it was unique. I can't think of actually... You know, other than Chrono Trigger and a couple others, it was a very unique game. The storyline was very well done, well written. You know, it was kind of... It was just, all in all, a better game, a far more superior game. And then Final Fantasy VII rolled around. I remember when I first picked up my Final Fantasy VII. It wasn't as hardcore as me trying to pick up my Chrono Trigger game, but it was up there. It kind of had like a sad little parallel of life itself that people seem to think that, you know, I kept on hearing from everybody, this game's amazing, this game's amazing, this game's amazing. And I plugged it in and started playing. And I went, wow, the graphics are amazing. Started playing the game. Wow, this is kind of boring. Played the game a little bit more. Holy crap, this is boring. Got to a certain point where I was playing it, and you know, I got to a point where I just kept playing it for the sake of playing it while I was playing other games. Like, at the time, I was playing like 4 or 5 other video games at the same time. You know, and I kind of remember actually eventually, for the longest time, I would like actually put Final Fantasy VII away for a while, went to other games, and were playing the other games before I went back to 7. So it took like a while where I'd actually like realize, hey, I got that Final Fantasy memory. I'd go to like start erasing games from my memory sticks, or my memory, what are they called? Memory cubes or whatever, memory cards, that's what they were. I used to call, you know, I'd be looking at my memory card going, wow, you know, I haven't like removed this save file. I'm gotta make some room to remove save file from my games. And I'm like, wow, I should really, you know, finish playing that Final Fantasy VII. So I'd start playing that Final Fantasy VII for a while, get bored, maybe even get to the next disc. And it took me a good couple years before I actually beat Final Fantasy VII. That's how little that game actually had an impact on me. And that's kind of sad, you know, if you really think about it. But I think I'm gonna break down my problems and at least kind of like show the comparisons and why I thought it just wasn't a good game. The first big hit, the first thing I had a problem with was Sephiroth. The character sucked. He was so lame ass. It was literally, he was just that giant or that dragon, just that thing you had to slay. Like the first thing I said to a friend of mine, we were playing the game and they started talking about Sephiroth, and we get this like part, we get this point where you get to the one point where you got to fight the stupid sand dragons if you don't get past this point like really quick. And you get past the area and you see this big sand dragon spiked on a stake. And I'm like, I turned to my friend and I said, you know, I hate to say it, I'm pretty certain he's going to be the end boss. And well, lo and behold, he kind of was. It was a lame character. You know what? I'm going to say this right now. Compared to Kefka, he sucked. I'm sorry, Kefka was the villain you wanted to kill. Sephiroth was the villain you didn't care was alive or dead. He had no interest for me. But Kefka, this unique character who had all these different things that he did, like he just overall, like he poisoned an entire village. He like turned a poor girl into like a slave and used her as a living weapon. He manipulated. He turned people against people. He was such a chicken shit coward of a character. How can you not like Kefka? He was just so fun as a villain, and the fact that he becomes a god, pretty much wins and destroys the world. There is an amazing thing for the game. Like, that was just so cool. Here's this villain, like everyone, like the Emperor. He betrays everyone and gains ultimate power. How can you not think that's not cool? Like, it just the true fact that everyone underestimated this villain so much. Like, he was so underestimated. And because he was so underestimated, he snuck on the win and defeated everybody. And ended up destroying the world. Like, he wiped out everything. That is freaking amazing. That has never been seen in most I haven't seen a video game where the main villain is just this total, like, pansy. This total douchebag pansy. And he totally wins. And he's still badass. He still did horrible and dreadful stuff. He, like, he poisoned an entire kingdom. Like, come on, that's pretty badass. Like, how many people can say, hey, I poisoned an entire, like, kingdom of, like, a bunch of, like, if you take the terms of Final Fantasy characters and how many people are actually in a village compared to how many people you actually see, because apparently you don't actually see everyone that is on the, like, it's assumed that there's way more people in there. I doubt a kingdom consists of 23 people. That's kind of an unsustaining kingdom at that point. But apparently there's like way more. So like the fact is that he did murder an entire kingdom. That's probably 1,000 people died horribly. Not to mention he murdered like, how many people did he savagely murder? How many innocent monsters were savagely murdered? The Espers were killed because of him. He was such a douchebag. I absolutely loved him as a villain. And the boss stage for him was so amazing. It was so well done. It was just an absolute... just the best villain I think I saw for Final Fantasy VII. For Final Fantasy VI. I think it's still like, I still think he's the best villain of all time for Final Fantasy. I can't really remember most of them. The only reason I remember Sephiroth is because there's a lot of people who like to draw him in weird yaoi type things. With him kissing Cloud. That's another thing I hate about that. There's so many fangirls for Sephiroth that like Sephiroth. Why? Like, I hate to say it. What was the more female series? Was Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VII really wasn't. Actually, I'd say quite the reverse. I'd actually make references to it. It was actually way more sexist than Final Fantasy VI. Like, Final Fantasy VI had you two female leads. One being Terra, the other one I can't unfortunately remember her name because I keep changing it, but I'm going to refer to her as she was the Mage Knight, the blonde Mage Knight. I can't really remember her name because I keep changing it to Sarah, so I'm going to refer to her as Sarah. These are your two main female leads. Terra's the first one, who you play with before before Kefka destroys the world. And then Sarah was the one after the fact. And it was just, overall, you did have two female leads. They end up being the female, role that you start off with. Yeah, the game could switch to having male, like, you could play, like, other characters after that fact, but they were both storylines kind of followed their story, up to a point. Although there were other different side stories that were added, but they were basically the main leads. And that's the honest truth of the situation, that there were actually, the only Final Fantasy, I think, that did that, where there were two female, unless, I know the newer one, I think, has a female character. I haven't actually played the newer one, to be honest. I've kind of lost interest after 10. 10 and 10-2, that was my last Final Fantasies. I haven't really played any of the other ones afterwards. Like, I played them, but not, like, thoroughly. I was more interested in more other games during the PS2 era. With gameplay, I actually was playing, Persona 3, for example. There's quite a few I actually played before then. But I'm kind of getting off topic. And I'm just saying, for every girl that loved the Sephiroth, it's like, it was sexist. Have you seen Tifa? Like, she's so top heavy, I'm waiting for her to fall over. Like, I think it was more of a dirtier game, actually, on some levels than the other one, which I guess that was the added bonus if you want to add that to your, like, awesomeness of Final Fantasy VII. The other thing I didn't like is the other big thing, the other big storyline thing was inevitably the death scene. With that character, I don't remember. All I remember is using her as a healer, so I can't remember her for anything else. Again, the funny thing is I played Final Fantasy VI and I played Final Fantasy VII before I did this video. I did play Final Fantasy VII. I got bored of it and went to Breath of Fire 4. I went to Breath of Fire 4. I was like, I feel like playing Breath of Fire 4. So I started playing Breath of Fire 4, and then I'm like, wow, I still haven't done a video yet. Maybe I should go back to playing, Final Fantasy VII, because if I'm ever going to talk about this, I better know more about it. I'm like, no, I think I'm just going to go back to playing Breath of Fire 4. So I can't remember the character's name. All I know is she dies. And I gotta admit, that death scene was lame ass. It was so... she wasn't a good character. I didn't care that she died. I didn't care that what's-his-face threw it in the river. I never was emotionally involved with her as a character. Again, I gotta go back to Final Fantasy VI. I was more emotionally involved with what was happening to the Swordmaster Kane's family and how they died in that poison that I was talking about before. I was so more interested in, the thief character, I think his name was Cecil, the thief character Cecil's wife, who passed away. I was so indicated in Serge's character, the gambler, the fact the airship death. There was just so many more tragic deaths, and probably one of the most tragic of any deaths I've actually seen in a video game. I still think this is probably the most emotional death scene I've ever seen in a video game, and this is up there. Even Breath of Fire had some pretty emotional deaths. But this is still I still think is one of my most heavy emotional death scene. When the Mage Knight ends up meeting up with Cid, and they end up stuck on this island for months, And then one day Sid passes away, and she's left all alone, lost all hope. She decides to commit suicide. It is one of the most tragic and sad things. And you role play this, by the way. You actually play this. You actually play going up to the cliff and falling off to your death. You do survive, but it's still one of the most saddest things. And then you find out that he was building you a raft and a way to escape the island so you can actually get to the main continent and find other people. It's just such a sad thing. And I felt myself so emotionally involved with that one scene. I was just like, oh my god, no, and she jumps, and it's like, wow, that's so tragic. And then all of a sudden you like see a bandana, a seagull comes down, and like the bandana of the thief character's on there, and she gains hope, and then she finds the airship. I mean, she finds a little raft ship, and she ends up going where she has to go. It's so fulfilling. It's like tragedy and joy in the same moment, and I was so emotionally involved compared to the other like Final Fantasy VII. I wasn't emotionally involved. 6, like I got more emotional about a 16-bit character over this awesome CG of at the time character death. I actually found myself more entranced, more enjoyable on that storyline and how sad it was and how honestly sad it was that I how can you not like it? Like the idea that you not only get to play in this destroyed world. Like you never see that in a video game. You never see like an entire, like usually the bad guy gets destroyed, the world kind of like, everyone lives happily ever after. Final Fantasy VI was literally that moment where you could honestly say, except for like in Breath of Fire, where they had the fake ending, Final Fantasy VI, you actually roleplay the end of the world and trying to bring the world back from the brink. How is that not better? And I still hear people say that, Final Fantasy VII was the better game. I just so disagree. And my last knock is the gameplay. The gameplay itself was Final Fantasy VI. It was almost a rough thing. The whole idea of getting the Mysterions or whatever, the little gems in the Final Fantasy. Again, it's sad. I know I'm saying this. I know I'm missaying stuff and I'm not remembering certain things. It's truly sad. I played this game for 2 weeks and I still can't remember. I played 4 hours of Breath of Fire 4 and I can't remember anything. That's how memorable Final Fantasy VII is, people. The graphics were all that it had. I'm telling you this right now. The graphics were all that it had. Like how can I not at this point say, wow, that you can't not add that to the funniness, the funny factor to it. I remember the graphics clearly. I remember people talking to me about the graphics clearly. I can't remember the game I played for 2 weeks. That's just, oh wow. I played 6. I remember 6. I remember 6 like it was yesterday. Even like played that one. And I can't. Wow. Okay. Maybe I'm taking this too over control. Maybe there is something that maybe I just missed or I didn't feel for. But. I guess it's just one man's opinion, but I can honestly say, when I hear people say the best game on the PlayStation 1 was 7, I so disagree. And there's so much proof out there of other games that were better. I would suggest the Tales of Destinies. I would suggest the Lunars. I know the Lunars are for Sega CD, Sega Saturn, or Sega CD as well, but they were both really good on both consoles, worth playing. Wild Arms. Again, the Breath of Fire games. Chrono Cross was good, even though everyone seems to hate it. That's another one I actually rather liked, because the idea of finding out that in Chrono Trigger everything you did was for nothing, I thought that was kind of cool. I actually thought that was cool. The Parasite Eve games. There were just other games that were on that console that were better for the RPG. The Suikoden games. Uh, so I'm gonna say this: if you're looking for a PlayStation, if you're still trying to pick up your old, if you're like me and you're trying to get the old stuff and kind of enjoy the old stuff, I'm gonna make a suggestion to you. When someone says Final Fantasy VII, remember nostalgia boners bring a lot of hype in the world, and that sometimes, no matter how much someone says it's an amazing game, go look at the Breath of Fire 4, go look at the other games, and make your decision and see what else is out there. Because if you're only picking up a PlayStation for one game, if you're only like looking for that one game, you're kind of going to be disappointed. Well, that's it. If anyone else wants to put comments on other amazing games that were on the PlayStation that are worth talking about, other RPGs that everyone, people just overlooked or mislook, that didn't look at, please put your comments down on there saying, hey, I like this game, or hey, this game was good, or hey, that game was good. Hopefully, we can prove to the world that, the PlayStation 1 was not just a one-hit wonder with Final Fantasy VII. I know there were other games on the PlayStation that were worth talking about, but when it comes to RPGs, that was the one I always hear people talk about, and I want to hear a change of opinion when it comes to that system, because there were amazing games. Well, this is me signing off.